micro wind turbines are now being produced, which are...
Micro wind turbines.
Yeah, very, very cost effective, and in windy areas such as this in New Mexico, fabulous way of generating electricity. I mean, here, could I just say, we're sitting in New Mexico, which has more sunlight per day than you'd want to think about, more energy per square metre than we could ever possibly use, wonderful wind resource, and all of that's just going to waste. At the moment, people are just paying for fossil fuels brought in from elsewhere to run their energy needs, which is crazy.
You write about mini cats. What are they?
They're a new innovation in motor vehicles. Now, we don't know yet whether they're going to work out or not, but they're compressed air cars.
Compressed air?
Yeah. You compress air in the sort of containers that we now use for natural gas, and then run your car off compressed air. Now, they're potentially very good for city transport, and if we use a hybrid system, hybrid electric compressed air system, we can get greater synergies. But these are the sort of things that people are going to be driving 40 years from now. We can't be driving Humvees anymore, and Hummers, I think you should call them here, 40 years from now, or anything like them. We have to be, for transport energy, we have to be driving cars that are at least 10 times as efficient in their use of energy as the ones we use today, and they can't be using fossil fuels. So whoever cracks that, they're going to be the wealthy of the future. And can I just say, it's been so disappointing to see the American car industry lobby relentlessly against its own best interest. If you look at what's happened in California, where the government's regulated outboard motors, to the point where America now makes the best and cleanest outboard motors in the world. They're the equivalent of the Toyota Prius, and they will cream the opposition globally for marine transport. But the car industry have been big enough to stand up to California and argue the toss about regulation. And as a result, they're going down the plug hole. They're going down the gurgler. It's so sad to see American industry argue so thoroughly and efficiently against its own long-term interest. I really don't understand why that's happening.
Tim Flannery, here in New Mexico yesterday, you went to a high school in Santa Fe, and you were talking to the kids about what they can do. Can you tell us about the proposals you made to them?
Well, what I said to them was that at the moment, kids, you're living like cattle in a feedlot. The electricity comes down the lines to you, and you never think about where it comes from or what the consequences of the use are. Same with your water. You never think where it comes from or where it goes to, and your food. So the first step of creating a more sustainable life is to get out of that feedlot. Ask your mum and dad for the power bill to see it, and have a look at that power bill and try to understand its consequences and what it means, and give mum and dad a challenge. Say, look, if I can save $100 a quarter off that power bill, will you give me $200 for pocket money? And that's a fair deal, I reckon,
So you save money on the energy bill, and the kids pocket
pocket
what they say.
Which is great incentive, because kids understand this stuff, and it's a great thing for them to think, we'll turn things off at standby. And what a learning experience to learn how much electricity it takes to run a refrigerator, a television, a computer, and how you can save energy by turning them off at standby, or buy some new light globes and start big savings immediately. So, we've got to just...
Incandescent bulbs allowed in Australia?
They won't be after 2009. They were invented by Thomas Edison a century ago, and it always astonishes me that cartoons in the US, you see the guy having a bright idea with the light bulb. It's actually the dumbest idea around, that light globe. We need the compact fluoro to appear in the thought bubble.
How did it happen that Australia is completely banning them?
Well, our Environment Minister is an ingenious man. He works for a very right-wing government, but he himself ran Goldman Sachs for some time. Very smart, understands the issues, and he saw this as a win-win for everyone. And it's amazing, because the industries even that sell lights in Australia have got on board with this. It's been wonderful to see the transformation. So in our country, we'll move to the new clean technologies within the next couple of years, and I think it's something the whole world could do so easily.
The meeting that will be taking place in Bali in December, how important is this? Who's meeting? And what role is the U.S. going to play in that?
Well, this is the Kyoto process, and the UN process. The nations of the world are going to get together there to start trying to broker some aspects of the new treaty that will replace Kyoto. There'll probably be an emphasis on tropical forests there, just because Indonesia is such an important repository of those forests. But we will build between then and December 2009 in Copenhagen the foundation stones of the new treaty. And have a guess what two countries don't have a seat at the table? Your country and my country, which is the great tragedy. Kyoto now is coming to the end, but the signatories, the people who've ratified, are sitting around building the future, and we're locked out, which is why it's so critically important that we ratify and get a seat and get heard. Of course, the world would love to have us join in this. And China has recently said, that if the world can agree on an approach, they'll come on board, whatever that approach is. So the ball is in our court now. Australia and the US really need to make some very serious decisions in the next 2 years about how we address this problem. And of course, this being a global problem, the atmosphere is a global commons. We need everyone to join in. We can't do it on a country-by-country basis. We have to have a common meeting.
You have painted such a dismal scenario of what can happen with global climate change, global warming, and yet you remain hopeful. Why?
Because the solutions are actually within our grasp. When you see the changes that humanity has performed in the past, whether it was World War II, where we went from having a very primitive sort of technology to having rocketry and nuclear weapons, which are not a great thing, but they're an amazing technical triumph, radar and so forth. We know we can take these technologies that are now in nascent form and scale them up and produce a cleaner and greener world. And the other thing, if I could say to you, is that I'm confident because I can see that this is going to be the great project of the 21st century. This is what will enthuse people. This is what will make people wealthy. It's a bit like in the 19th century, the emphasis was on slavery and universal suffrage and all of those things that we benefit from so much today, those changes. The 21st century is going to be about sustainability. It'll be the great energising project, and none of us can afford to be left behind.
Tim Flannery, I want to thank you very much for being with us. Tim Flannery here with us in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Australian of the Year for 2007, zoologist, paleontologist, one of the world's leading climate change scientists. If you'd like to get a copy of today's show, you can go to our website at democracynow.org. I want to thank everyone who made this broadcast possible. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke, Sharif Abdel-Quddus, Aaron Mate, Angelique Comet, Jeffrey Hagerman, Ricardo Lobo, Steve Martinez. Thank Dennis Moynihan and Doug Crawford. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.